Branko Malic for Kali Tribune. In this podcast, we'll make an exception to a rule we are following for more than a year now, that is the rule of avoiding the quote-unquote current issues, daily politics issues, one may say, and customarily stick to what we have expertise in to some extent. Namely, we'll talk about two issues that are to an extent connected. That is the issue of the end of the lockdown worldwide and the current crisis in USA. One of the reasons being questions we get from our readers and even some reproach that is directed to us for not addressing this issue. This is not entirely true that we are not addressing them. We have addressed coronavirus issue, but I realize that there are people who think that this was not addressed enough. Well, I think it was addressed too much already. One of the reasons why we are reluctant to just jump into daily politics and trying to analyze current events is that it is very hard to come to truth about those events. If you take coronavirus crisis, there are a lot of unknowns there is a lot of disinformation about it from the whole coming from the entirety of political spectrum. And this time around, I for one was very reluctant to look into conspiracy theories about it. Customarily, I'm not that reluctant, but from what I saw, the main conspiracy theories or the basis for them in medicine are so stupid that even the high school knowledge of biology can be used to refute them. I'll put in the show notes link to one English neurologist living in Japan that is debunking some of these conspiratorial claims, or claims that there is no virus and such. He is not easy to listen, he has very long streams, not easy to follow, not because of him being inarticulate, but him going on rants and, well, you'll see for yourself if you're interested. But I think he provides pretty good debunking of people like doctors that were used as sources by people like David Icke and such. So it is very hard to figure out what to think about this all. Mihai has done one take. I made one take at the beginning of the crisis. He made 2 parts podcast at the end of the crisis, and in most of his conclusions I do agree with him. But we all this lockdown was not the same everywhere, and reactions are correspondingly not the same everywhere. To come to rational explanation, if ever, about this, it will take some time. And in everything happening in time, you need some aftertime to have an afterthought, because every thought is an afterthought. And this is not escape into philosophy. This is just trying not to come up with an ideas that will in the future prove to be wrong. Nobody can avoid being wrong, but at least has to make a try. And in a situation when one is feeling hot-headed about some issue, it is best not to speak about that issue. That's a thing of maturity. On the other hand, I'm not in any way obliged to address anything I don't want to address, or my associates on Kali Tribune are also not obliged to address anything. We are not government institution. We are not part of some media or academic conglomerate. this puts us out of the safety net, social and economic safety net, but gives us the right to choose what we'll cover and won't cover. So in the future, please, if you think there's something that is not covered on Kali Tribune, of course, you are entitled to let us know, but you are not entitled to call us out because of it. So when we put, let us put this out of the way. One or two issues that I'm addressing here I find more interesting, and those are riots in USA. Not in the sense, not for themselves, for the sakes of themselves, as a supposed overture to some momentous change in the global order, or better to call it disorder, in global jungle, political jungle. What interests me the most in this social phenomena that is unfolding before our eyes is that for most commentators, if not all of them, it is unfolding in front of their unfolding in front of their eyes that are fixed to LCD screens, that is to say, not live. The other thing is that a very good deal of the people participating in these riots on all sides of the conflict make sure that everything they and other people participating in this situation do is being recorded by their mobile phones. I find that not really peculiar, because this is not a new thing, but I think it kind of stuck out a little bit more this time around, and this is what interests me. What interests me is semi-virtuality of everything that seems to happen today in the everyday world of politics. Now, I use this daily politics, everyday politics term. It's translation of the term from my own language. I don't know, is the meaning the same in English? Exactly the same, because this is literal translation. What I mean by it is politics as it unfolds daily, because if you want to figure out some politics a bit deeply, then you have to look, if not in the program that brought it about, because it's quite possible that there is no program, then into deeper causes, historical causes that brings it to the fore. On the other hand, when you talk about daily politics, you are talking about like phenomenology of what's going on. You're just trying to figure out what's going on and why it is going on. I find that throughout the media circuit, because this is the job of the media, a real intellectual, that is to say, the man who is, let's call him philosopher or even politologist or classical sociologist, would not jump to conclusions. That is to say, he would not go into explaining the causes of daily events as they unfold, because he knows that's not really possible. That's something the media do. And in this world of ours, it seems that most of us have become media nodes. The very urge to pull out your phone and to film something happening is making you a media node, is making you, let's say, a relay of information, notably visual information, because it seems that everything today tends towards these visual aspects. To the detriment of audio and, above all, written word. It's not about the words, it's about the images. Well, we on Kali Tribune prefer words, and we prefer words, whether it be spoken or written. And whenever we can, we provide both. Images are a rare thing, and if you get an image, it's usually the image of a book from which I am reading, so you can follow more easily difficult philosophical subjects. Now, this is what might be called that in that old moniker, society of spectacle. But I think it is getting to be more than this. It is getting to be a participatory participatory permanent revolution or permanent crisis. And what I don't like in explanations that look for a deep state, so-called, as a true cause of these events, that is manipulating these events, is that people customarily take themselves out of the picture. People are some kind of innocent bystanders. Well, or victims. Problem is that filming these things is not being bystander. It means participating in the creation of their image. And I think that people today tend to take image to be more worthy of attention than the reality. I heard many times people say, half jokingly, if you haven't filmed your sexual intercourse, it never happened. Well, I don't find this very funny, because I think in a lot of minds today, this is the part. This is partially true. Also, if the riots weren't filmed, the riots didn't happen. I think that would apply too. There is nothing new about that, in a sense that, in a qualifying sense, in the sense that there was nothing like that before. I was sure it was, but it's getting more and more pronounced. And this gets us to the corona crisis also, and that ominous moniker, ominous phrase, new normal, as stupid and as it is ominous. Because I don't think that it is a product of any planning on the grand scale, but simply the expression of the path of least resistance. The technocratic or technodoulic, by this I mean serving the technology, standpoint and attitude, is the path of least resistance for all of us. And I don't like using word us, making somehow people listening to me to feel unconsciously, intimately connected to what I think. Most people who use us frequently do that for this reason. I don't do it precisely for that reason, but in this sense, in this instance, I think I can use it because we are all at fault, in fact. And this is something that I think people very rarely acknowledge, that is to say, the fault, not to go too far and say sinfulness of what we as humans do. In some cases, as is in this frankly decomposing, hypertrophied political left, it's expressed as an entitlement, constant search for entitlement, especially through some kind of mostly imaginary or sometimes real victimhood. But it is also present on the right. And what I see in this is the surrender to technocratic paradigm or technodoulic paradigm of following the path of least resistance. If you have mobile phone that can film, you will film. You may be so aware of the situation and so disciplined that maybe you won't do it, but it is immaterial because 99% people around you will do it. And nobody can isolate himself or herself from others. We are all together in some sense. And this is a huge issue. This is the issue that remains unaddressed, and with good reason, because only God knows how to address it. The thing with Corona lockdown was, at least in my country, that you could notice in the very first week how some things fall off. Some as Francis Bacon would call them, idolaphori, the idols of the marketplace. Those supposedly very important things like values of European Union, values pushed by NGOs, and the whole this gamut of ideological nonsense we are frequently terrorized with. It happened because people had a real crisis at their hands and just went back into shadows. And this quickly changed because crisis was, as it happens, not that severe as it seemed at first sight. And I think, by the way, that lockdowns are more various forms of lockdowns are more an instance of leaders trying to cope with something they don't understand than introduction to new technocratic society. This introduction is not needed because this is the society we already have. At the global level, I think, at least in the Western world, maybe even more in the Far East. But let me explain what I mean by this technodoulic or technocratic, because I want to stress the participatory and essential role of so-called people. This is the society in which it is quite normal to be overwhelmed by emotion of righteousness and go into conflict with police and at the same time make selfies. This is what makes one a part of this mindset and mentality, and this mentality is in a sense even post-human, because human beings, when something is important to them in a very real sense, or deeply important, have a tendency to make this private, that is to say, to make this intimate, because it's very logical. What touches you most intimately is what you understand as most intimate. That is to say, you don't like sharing it around, especially in a very superficial, unintimate form. Yet, this is the form everything takes today. It has to be of social networks and so on and so forth. And then we come to experience a strange phenomenon where this imaginary world of electronic, participatory, interactive media like internet get enmeshed with physical social reality of physical fights, burnings, in America, I'm referring to USA, of everything coming with it. Because these mobile phone cameras are what give the nodes that are holding them and using them are make them direct nexus between virtual space and the real, let's say, space. And it becomes combined. So you have to address, if you want to address a physically developing event, you have to address its virtual or spectacular dimension. And everything is spectacular today. I think that USA had far worse and far more violent riots in the past already. Not an expert, not a resident of USA, but this is just my opinion, knowing things that were happening there in 60s and early 70s and so on. But never mind. Let's put this aside for the sake of this subject. So I think that this moment of participation is lost to a lot of people. And then you have these intellectuals, let's call them that, of the right, not alt-right anymore, because alt-right completely dissolved, as was to expect from its nature, but also intellectuals that are some kind of radical, not in the negative sense, but intellectually radical on the conservative or right spectrum, that go beyond mere phrases. This is not to undermine them. What the other thing undermines them. Namely, those people are also spending obviously the whole of their time on Twitter. That is to say, their everyday existence is completely enmeshed with virtual world and 1-2 sentences and meme world of Twitter. And they, of course, have very profound explanations of what is going on in USA. But what seems to me is that they are themselves participating in the spectacle, that they are participating in history as at least 50% spectacle. I myself think that this is no way you can participate in history. This is only the way you can distort history. So I don't like, a priori, don't consider seriously talk about civil war in America and such things. And the reason is this. For civil war, you need an army. That is to say, you need 2 armies, or at least that one side that is without army can develop an army before it is destroyed. For me, war is a very real thing with very real parameters. But for those people who say this, war is already modified. That is, war is partly virtual. It is partly something that consists in partisan physical violence in real life, and manipulation and info war or whatever, meme war in the virtual sphere. I reject this. Also, I don't think this is a war, and I don't think that victories and losses in this war are really consequent. That is to say, they are in a day and age because our world, in my opinion, is starting to become virtual. This does not mean that what is physical, or even more what is spiritual, is transforming into what is unreal, but that people are putting it there, that people can afford to wage real conflicts in the unreal medium, and to bring the unreal medium into real conflicts, partially making the very event unreal. At least some components of event, for instance, a riot in some American city, are completely matter of spectacle. And most people, if not all, who are commenting on this and giving you causes, explanations, and what is most important, prophesizing the outcome, are doing this by watching what they see on their screen. I, for one, and we on College Tribune, reject this approach. We don't want to participate in this approach because it is by its very nature delusional. Any correctness, any truth said in this manner, acquired in this manner, is partly a delusion. For my mind, there is no delusion in truth. There is nothing but the truth in truth. If this means that, for instance, I cannot give a comment on current events, then I won't comment on them at all. And I don't think this is running from the truth. This is running from virtuality, and running, well, we could say running from this world in dissolution, which is, we might say, something quite normal. People used to leave the world in the Middle Ages and refused to participate in the world that was also very violent to some extent, and very difficult, but it was far more real than the world is now, because it was not mixed with a spectacle that is produced through electronic media. It was not a mediated world. So it is no wonder that maybe some phenomena that were obvious to people in such world are not obvious now, because intention of the bulk of human population is turned towards other things. It's not turned towards reality. It is turned towards the image of reality. because after all, image can always be made more appropriate to one's liking than reality itself. You cannot appropriate the reality. You can only share, I would say, the same root with it, and this is very important. But that's, of course, another subject, the subject of a more proper, let's say, philosophical analysis. So to conclude, I have no idea how this thing in the US will end up. I don't know how this corona crap will end up. But what I know is that no one is innocent, and this is the point. So I don't use this platform to shout against Bill Gates. I know what that man is to some extent, because I know his kind of attitude towards human beings. I find it nefarious, but I don't find him that dangerous and that influential as he is made out to be, because a lot of people participate in decision making at high levels, and this decision making is also to a large extent just a reaction to circumstances. Nobody is that powerful. You cannot provide a human being with the powers of Lucifer or Satan. On the one hand, it is not realistic. On the other hand, what I know about that Lucifer guy, he is quite easy to offend. I wouldn't go around offending the devil. It's not smart thing to do. Anyway, this is where was I? Yeah. This is not something that can be digested in short form. It was not something that can be digested into one valid account. Especially now, it was maybe such events maybe could be digested in that way in previous times, but now when what you get is a myriad of broken pieces of various perspectives, where each perspective holds itself to be valid. And I'm thinking here about people who are turning themselves practically into internet nodes in the real world, mediating all this. In those circumstances, the smartest thing to do is not to participate. To sign out, one might say, and approach things from a different angle. From an angle that was used maybe 50 years ago. Why not? But this angle will not provide you with ready-made answers. It will not provide you with answers that will not be critically reassessed maybe a month later, and it will take time and effort, and one who is above all, it would take a decision to do it, because it would take such time and effort. Because never forget, if you are on internet and if somebody comments to you and say this is civil war in America caused by the deep state, the one who is saying this does know crap about deep state, because knowing something about those both deep and high levels of power means at least, at the minimum, intimately knowing somebody who is connected. This does not work. All of those sweeping inferences and judgments come from browsing the internet. And this is completely delusional. You cannot know that from internet. As I said, civil wars are something that requires some real factors that are not present in this situation, and what we have now is transforming, as much as transforming of one society or social reality is a transforming of consciousness that redefines its experience. I don't think that important things can be defined or redefined at will, because they are not created by human beings, and I consider then that there is a root of some kind of illusion at all that. That's why one of the main reasons why we on Kali Tribune are very careful in addressing those things. I hope this was enough of daily politics for on Kali Tribune for another, let's say, 3 months time. Thank you for your attention. This is Branko Malic signing out.